And we are back in.
We are back again here with part 3 of Salt of the Streets, episode 125. Thank you again for joining us. Obviously here on our youtube.com/Salt of the Streets. We also have our Instagram, instagram.com/Salt of the Streets, Facebook, facebook.com/Salt of the Streets, and the Patreon, of course, the patreon.com/Salt of the Streets. If you want to go there, subscribe, help us make more, better content, become a patron. We have the book club, we have the newsletters, the beer shows that are coming out all the time. So go there, help us make more, better content just like that. I want to thank Leggings and Aprons. She's off for a little while for Two of the Cake Chops. Swab Blended for the haircuts. Lexi Kyle on Twitch if you want to go there and watch some video games. And Location Skate Shop in downtown Bremerton if you need a skateboard. Personal social media. That's
word.
But it came up there. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Alpaca Donovan on Instagram and Salt of the Street on Twitter. Colin is a Big Bird Offie on both those things. That's all. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, you're a prescriber to Dumpster Fire now. You watch the Dumpster Fire, Bridget Fedesi.
Most of the time.
You need to be watching because her and Jordan are both going to be giving birth real close to the same time.
Yeah.
So your guys' next child might coincide with Bridget Fedesi's child.
There you go.
So you got to watch out for that. Zeke, you ever watch Dumpster Fire on YouTube or know who Bridget Fedesi is?
No.
Oh man, it is a great time. It's such a good way to just sit back and like laugh at the burning world and lets you just kind of like, all this bad news, all the world ending stuff, you got to take time to laugh at it, man. You can't take it too seriously. Otherwise, we'll all go insane.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I use Rick and Morty for, but I'll use that.
Dude, that episode, Rick and Morty's fucking great. Let's just put it that way. There's
great, dude.
Nobody does it better. That is a wild ass beer, by the way.
Isn't it?
That is a full-bodied Pilsner. I went through 24 German imported beers during December, and it was one of those like advent calendar deals. Which, by the way, if for all you viewers and listeners out there, if you didn't catch that, you catch that on our YouTube page. It's all on. I think there's a playlist for it and all that stuff.
That's right. Instagram too.
And on the Instagram. But this is wild. There's actually, I don't know if you could see it in there. There's like sediment. You got the yeast proteins and stuff floating around on here. You don't usually see that in a Pilsner. This is really good.
Yeah. It's like a little bit fruity,
Yeah.
It's sour on the front, and then the aftertaste, I feel like, is a little bit fruity.
I could drink that all day, dude.
There's a little bit more if you want the rest of this. I didn't. Here, drink the rest of this first.
I
didn't know it was going to be so good.
Twist my arm a little bit. So, if you guys were here during the last segment, part 2, we are going to do kind of a little switcherooski because Ivan is a loving and caring father, and he's taking care of some family duties right now. So we're going to kind of jump ahead to our originally scheduled part 4, and so we're going to talk about the newest Supreme Court judge. I think they're calling her KBJ now. She's like the new acronym, right?
That's what I wrote down.
Oh
here.
man,
they are. She's been on. She's not even ruled over any cases yet, and she's already has an acronym. She's KBJ. Yes. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about this for a little bit. So I have a little bit of a preface, and then we'll kind of get into the conversation. So, like I said, I watched all but 3 hours of the questioning. And so
sorry about that.
And I stopped watching and I told Colin because I got to the end and she's been answering questions for like 18 hours or something like that. And now the Democrats are at the point where they're asking her questions that are just, could you expand on this particular idea? And so she has no idea what they're going to ask her, so there's no prepared answer for it. She's talking really slow, and it's no hit on her because she doesn't know what they're going to say, and she's been at it for 18 hours. So but the hearings itself are unlistenable at that point. She's talking very slow. She's repeating herself a lot because she's trying to think while she's talking at the same time, and it's been so long. And at that point, it's just unlistenable. Her answers are like, in my time as a judge, I've learned that in your job as a judge, you have to do things that are very difficult because being, a judge is very difficult. And it is unlistenable. But
not quite as bad as Kamala Harris's. It's time to do what we've been doing.
No,
the time is.
No,
it's not quite that bad.
No, not quite as bad as that. Right. But it gets pretty close, and so I just had to stop. But I got the vast majority of it. So My only real preface to it, right, is that so obviously she's the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, and that was one of Joe Biden's promises, is that, you know, if I have a Supreme Court nomination in my time, it's going to be a black woman. I don't have any problem with this, right? My issue with this whole narrative is that, let me start with this. I have no doubt, and I don't really have any reason, because I've heard opinions either way. I don't have really any reason to believe that she's not qualified to be a Supreme Court justice. I don't have any reason to believe that, other than that's some people's opinions. Other people have ruled the other way. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anywhere near enough about the law to judge whether or not she's truly qualified, right? I think that because there's no set criteria even to be a Supreme Court justice, other than the few qualifying factors, but I do believe that by making the scope of your search so narrow in the beginning, you virtually guarantee you are not going to find the best candidate, because you are looking in such a small group. And that doesn't mean that she's not a good candidate and that she's not qualified, but because you are not looking at everybody, you are virtually guaranteeing that you do not have the best possible candidate. But I also would acknowledge that there's no way to really say who the best candidate could be, because there isn't a set criteria. So she could be, and like I said, I can't say for certain that she's not, but you almost guarantee that she's not the very best person at all, because you only looked at a certain category of people.
Yeah, you're how would you put that? I mean, the way in which you discriminated to get to your ultimate categorical list, by default, you have to consider the fact that you overlooked somebody,
Right.
because you
Who might
didn't
be
look
better.
at everybody.
Right.
You know, and that people discriminate all the time. We've talked about proper uses of discrimination and how that works, and what the word really means and how it is. And in this case, Joe Biden discriminated against every single possible Supreme Court judge nomination that wasn't a black woman.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know how, like you said, I don't know how many people there might have been, but obviously it begs the question, who didn't you look at? I mean, and just for intersectional reasons, why did you not look at everybody? It seems like if you're going to go with their line of logic, that it's been shoved down our throats since day one, there's not enough diversity on the bench like that. And so you have to, you have to look at things intersectionally at that point, and
So
then
this
you make a
better
decision
represents
from there.
America.
Yeah, and obviously, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know who might have worked if you didn't interview or look at least everybody that was qualified. You just said the only people, unless you're a black woman, you need not apply.
Right.
But also, I do recognize the reality of our political situation is that was something that he decided to hitch his campaign wagon to, and he doesn't need to think about it. There are enough, Democratic donor PACs and super PACs or 501c3s that donate to, that are so involved with the Democratic Party and their nominations and all this. They have a list ready to go to fit X, Y, Z type of categorical discrimination.
Right.
And they say, okay, pick her. And the Republicans do the same thing. They get a list from like the Federalist Society or something like that, and they go, okay, well, those are our top choices.
That's how you get a Rachel Levine as the deputy general or
Yes.
whatever as the health department. That's,
Bro.
like, she is perfect.
Yes.
She is the one for this job.
Man, that patriarchy is so crafty.
And she's a doctor. Right. That's great. Like, that's perfect. Let's find the highest job possible.
Oh.
Let's get her in there. Yeah. So, Zeke, do you have anything to say on this this initial portion?
No, bro. I
You're like, I'm not going there.
Yes.
No, it's just like, I try to put my politics aside on it. I don't know what her track record is on it.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a track record, so it would be disingenuous of me to be like, to just make these assumptions. It would be like a Brett Kavanaugh type deal by making assumptions based off of what Republicans are saying about her,
right,
or what Democrats like.
And
for me, I'm gonna give her a chance. And then we'll see what her track record is on what she, goes for or against.
Right.
And just actions speak louder than words. I don't care about any fucking
Yeah.
all that is just a dog and pony show. Really, when you go through that fucking Senate hearing or that
Oh yeah.
congressional hearing, it's just a big dog and pony show. Waste of fucking taxpayer money.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately just
It's going to be on along team lines.
so.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you
Best
that.
of luck to her.
Yeah, right. In that kind of vein of thought, your overall thoughts on the idea that, whose spot was she replacing? Judge Kennedy? No, not Kennedy, but it was a strongly considered kind of like reserved,
Breyer.
Justice Breyer.
Okay, yeah.
Like it was a liberal vote in
Yeah.
the colloquial use of like how people look at the Supreme Court. So it was a hard left vote. And so you filled the shoes with somebody that's another hard left vote. It's obviously it's toxic to the extreme when we actually care, if we care about a republic, to think that way. But recognizing the reality on the ground of what it is, it's almost like nobody really cares, because it's like, well, nothing's changed at this point. You've kept the two sides waging a constant war to get the one extra vote or the two extra votes whenever you can. I mean, basically the battle lines stayed where they're at. No front has changed. Everybody's the same thing. And so it's almost like, who really cares? That's almost why I think we got kind of like a lackluster Republican defense, if you will, or an attack on her. It was pretty mild. I mean, there were some things I'm sure we'll get into about like her rulings on like pedophilia cases or something like that, or sexual stuff like that.
There was something about if she could define what a woman was.
Yeah,
and I mean,
and that's just a
that
dumb
bothered
question.
me, but that was just like whatever.
Right. So
because whoever asked that, just to put a bow on it, whoever asked it knows what they were asking and knew that she couldn't say anything. And it's if you watch more than one of these circus shows, like you know what you're in for, and a question like that just kind of pisses you off because you got to sit here for 15 more minutes until they get to the next person to ask their questions. It's like, you're just wasting my fucking time now that I got to sit here plugged into C-SPAN and watch this shit show unfold, and then all the stupid headlines are going to come out the next day and all this. When it comes to actual substance and questions that have import and matter, it's not one of those. It's just a waste of time.
So everyone did their traditional thing. Sheldon Whitehouse talked about dark money on both days. So for 30 minutes, he talked to her about dark money, which doesn't really have anything to do with her unless they're going to see a case that's going to overturn Citizens United or something.
Yeah.
Then she doesn't have anything to do with that. They're asking her a bunch of questions or framing questions in the way that it would be her personal opinion in which she can't answer. And then saying, well, why the fuck won't you answer this question?
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff like that. So
the same thing you were getting pissed off when people were talking to Gorsuch about.
There were many people who used it to make points about Kavanaugh, and there were many people who used it to talk about the shadow docket and talked about different aspects of the court that they don't like, and they used her, even though she's not even on the court yet, as a window to talk about this issue for 50 minutes collectively over a few days, which again becomes fucking torturous to listen to, know? So the biggest point that I drew from this, right, does stem around these pedophilia charges, but really has little to do with her. Because over these days and the reading that I've done, my understanding is that it's true that the way that she rules on these cases is not specific to her. This is how a large majority of the judicial system is ruling on these cases for a few very particular reasons, right? So, and especially because I'm not sure, and because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not sure the ways in which these rulings would affect her rulings as a Supreme Court justice. I don't know how much this bears relevance on her job or position there, right?
Yeah, because no Supreme Court justice is going to be sitting there hearing the case of a pedophile
No.
that had child porn and then giving him a sentence.
She's not going to be she has nothing to do with sentencing when she's on the Supreme Court, nothing to do with the defining of the laws, nothing to do with the changing of the laws. So this, to me, the issue is much more of the trend that her rulings represent than the way that she is ruling, because she has children. I don't have any reason to believe over what I've seen from her that she wants there to be more child sex abuse imagery in the world. I don't have any reason to believe that that's what she wants, because that seems silly. I don't know why she would want that when she has children. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't have any reason to believe that she wants there to be more pedophilia, more child abuse, more any of that stuff. I don't have any reason to believe that. So it seems the only large point about the political parties I will make, I think, is that it seems weird the Republicans didn't focus on that, the trend that they're representing, because I think they didn't want to acknowledge the role Congress has in the definition of those sentencing guidelines. And I think it's odd that the Democrats wanted to take so much responsibility away from the justices and focus so much on them, and also choose still not to do anything about it. Because the sentencing guidelines are up to Congress. They are the ones that either define what the guidelines are, or they come up with a commission who will define what the guidelines are. And Ketanji Brown Jackson, was on that sentencing commission when it existed before.
And just, I don't know if we actually ever said it out loud, but the argument at this point is that her sentencing towards people that are involved in child sexual abuse imagery and things like that online, she was accused of essentially handing out very lenient sentences. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And these
most judges necessarily have sentencing guidelines that are developed by committees and things like that.
Then off of those sentencing guidelines, there are statutes that they follow, and she's talked about, and seems to be justified in my reading, there is statutes that lay out further guidelines and things the judges need to consider when they are taking those guidelines into account and doing the sentencing. Because of the way that this is being done, there are a few ideologies in place, that are somewhat commonplace, that are leading into this type of sentencing, right? And one of them is that when these original guidelines around child sex abuse imagery were laid out, computers were not really around. So most of the imagery was sent over the mail. And so it is based off of the sentence length is largely based off of the amount of imagery that you have. These judges argue that because it's done on the computer now, it is easier to get more images, and so it no longer indicates a higher level of depravity for someone to have 10,000 images like it would have when you had to collect it all through the mail.
Yeah. If you got 1,000 like actual like Polaroids or Kodak,
I understand that argument. I don't care.
Yeah, but also fuck you.
It doesn't matter to me as an American, as a parent, as a human being, whether you have one image of legitimate child sex abuse imagery or if you have 10,000.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's going to be my next question to you real quick. Would it matter if it was just one?
It doesn't matter to me. And I would lay out these I think I boiled it down to 4 categories. I would lay them out right here at the beginning, right? The way that I see this particular issue. Being of a child of the technological age, God damn it, Zeke, you went to school when this happened. We know people that when they were teenagers received nudes from other people and then were sex offenders until they were 18, 21 years old because they got pictures of people they were with or were talking to. And I'm not justifying this because it's stupid either way, right? Yeah. To send nudes is a bad idea, especially if you're a child, because it's fucking child sex abuse imagery, right?
Yep.
But this is a category in which I would say, okay, we're talking about a quote-unquote exception here in which a 17-year-old sent a picture to another 16-year-old or whatever the fuck, right? Of where this is not a child being abused. This child was making a mistake, right? There is also the instance, especially in the modern technological age, I would understand and acknowledge that in the tube style porn sites, right? Where it's a compilation, just like YouTube, it's a compilation of all of the videos that are on the internet aggregated into one place, in which you could find yourself watching a video, not of a child being abused, but of someone who is 17 years old that you don't know is 17 years old because it's in a teen category, right? And you could watch this and find that on your IP and be like, I literally didn't know that this person was underage, but this video was uploaded to this site and I consumed this entertainment. I would, on that note, implore anybody watching this, don't even watch a video that has the word teen in it. Don't put yourself in a position in which you could accidentally find yourself there, right? No. Because there's a That's a real thin line of justification of it was an accident to, well, I knew what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to dig anybody out of anything. These are just kind of the ways that I'm seeing this problem, right? There are also instances, Alex Jones is a good example of people being sent child sex abuse imagery, and it's
Yes.
being found on their computer that they did not download,
Yeah.
but it was sent to them, right?
Sitting in that email folder that you
Yes.
haven't opened in fucking 6-9 months.
This is another exception that I would quote unquote, that I would see in this. And the fourth category that I would see, again, this is boiled down, it's over just a few days of thinking, so we could argue forever about it. But the fourth category would be people who are actively seeking and using and consuming, distributing child sex abuse imagery, right? There's a further distinction between people who are creating and people who are consuming and distributing, but I think that the punishment should go from severe to ultra severe.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, if you have one image to any number of images, your punishment should be extremely severe.
Yeah.
And if you are found to have 10,000 images or whatever the fuck, let's make it progressively more severe. But I don't think, one of these instances that's in here, there was a kid who was 18 years old and he had some child sex abuse imagery, and he ended up getting 3 months, right? And one of the reasons is, he is pretty young, and I don't think that he's a pedophile, because if you have these images, this is another one of her justifications that's questioned, is that if you have these images, does that necessarily make you a pedophile? I would argue yes. I don't see why this distinction necessarily matters, right? Because again, we've talked about before the distinction between pederasty and pedophilia, whether or not you've committed pedophilic acts or you have pedophilic tendencies, right? Because you are fucked in the head. There are differences here, and I think that it's splitting hairs, that I don't care. As a citizen of this country, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care at all.
As a moral and ethical crime,
I don't care.
One is enough, and it doesn't matter how it happens. It happens,
Yes.
And then there's the alternative, the how it's perceived under the law type of situation, which is different. But yeah, to be somebody like that has those like images, or if you're somebody like, I don't know anybody that's talked about it like that, like on the internet. Thankfully, Milo got real close, but I think he just went straight into like actual abuse that that happened to him. But
Right.
if that's happening, like it's a moral crime. Like I don't want somebody to be thinking about that, even if they don't act on it.
Right.
But the minute they act on it, it becomes a different thing, because I'm not going to accuse you of a thought crime.
Right.
Right. If you express it out loud and you describe it to the world on the internet, then you fall into the legal category to me. Then it's time. Like,
Right.
I don't care if you haven't acted on it. If you're going to get on fucking TikTok and talk about that kind of shit, then you need to go away forever. Then I feel like taking a page out of the South Carolina book. And if you just continue to think about it, then we'll go with the firing squad. But then if you act on it, we'll go to the electric chair, because severe to ultra severe, that's I think appropriate anyways.
Yeah.
But does this not illustrate a kind of severe problem in our judicial
Yes.
system?
Yes.
The fact that there has to be sentencing guidelines necessarily put out through committees and this, that, and the other thing, and approved, and then the judges are expected to rule along these specific type of guidelines.
But there are only in certain cases are there mandatory minimums because of a Supreme Court ruling that does not bind the justices or the judges to these sentencing guidelines. And that's why in two of the cases that I think were actual pedophile cases, or like actual sex abuse cases, she had to go with the mandatory minimum of like 60 months. But in the other ones where she had discretion, she ruled lower, or she sentenced lower. And so my only real issue with her is that she had the discretion and didn't go with the highest sentence possible. And I recognize as a judge, you can't put your own personal feelings into the rulings, but there are sentencing qualifiers and magnifiers, like using a computer and stuff, that she didn't take into account, because she's like, oh, well, it all happens on computers nowadays. I don't give a shit. If there's a qualifier there to make it worse because it happened on a computer, then do that.
Yeah.
I don't care if you think it's not a good idea. If it's there, then do that.
Yeah.
So we've been going on for a minute. Zeke, do you have any thoughts on this? Sorry.
Sorry, I was.
No, we were talking.
I probably should have paused you at when you mentioned the underage people with the consuming underage material.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, where so you how do you feel about underage people consuming that content, and how do you feel about that as it ages? Right, so they've been consuming it. They've been caught with that material that they kept on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And this question was actually brought up by Ivan because he can still hear you, so he's just like, ask me about that.
Right. And I don't know. I don't know, because I've thought that same thing as we turned 18, 19 years old. Like you get a new phone. You're like, you're like, oh, maybe I'll keep this. You're like, oh wait, can I even keep these?
Yeah.
Because when you think about,
am I gonna be a felon now?
And it lends to kind of the same idea of like a picture of yourself.
Well, I mean,
if you're 17 years old and you have a picture of yourself, is that still child sex abuse imagery? Because it is you. Is that a possession of yours? So it's private. But I think that's an interesting point. I don't know. I think it's probably a safe idea to not keep it because you're not 18, or you're 18 and you're not underage anymore.
You're 18. Dump your nudes.
Start
a new folder.
I don't know that there's necessarily a moral quandary for me on that particular issue, but there seems to be that it's a not safe legal gray area that I probably think people should avoid. But on a personal level, I don't see really like a moral issue with that. If you're 17 years old when you get these pictures and your girlfriend is 17 years old and then you eclipse 18, I don't think that then becomes morally wrong that you still have these. Because I think it's a questionable. I don't know. That's.
I'm gonna put on my old man.
Because I don't. So I know that puts you on like the sex offender list. Does that stick for X amount of time? Does that make you a felon also? Like what?
I don't know. I know that when it happened, because it happened when we were in junior high, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
This is like a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
When we were in junior high.
It made it on the newspaper.
Yeah,
I'm glad I'm older.
It was a whole thing.
I'll leave
That was not a
names
thing
out
we had
and
to deal
everything.
with when I was going to school. Thank God.
We were in high school. There was a girl who sent some pictures and a video of herself to, I think, two for sure, maybe three dudes. And we're in junior high, so we're 15 at the most, because I think maybe we were freshmen. So we're 15, maybe someone was 16 or whatever, but we're all underage. And those two guys showed it to some other people, and I think maybe they sent it to a third person, I think is what it was. And they sent it to a third person, showed it to some other people, and this girl wasn't shaving yet, and so it was a funny thing. It was a joke, right? It became a joke. There was like a name involved. It was a whole deal. When the joking happened, obviously that girl found out, became very upset, which is very reasonable. Parents came involved. The law became involved. People's phones were taken, and two of those guys, one of them was on a list until they were 18 years old. The other one until they were 21. I'm not sure what the difference was in those things. One of them I kept up with until now. I just saw them not too long ago. So, and until he was 18 years old, he had to be on a sex offender registry because he had received and technically distributed these photos.
Yeah.
And so,
and isn't it interesting that you do that to somebody that's a child in the eyes of the law?
And
then you get off once you become an adult.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's why because I came up in this age, I understand that gray area of the law that you have to register as a sex offender, but also when you were 17 years old or 15 years old, you got to make a nude photo of another 15-year-old. And it, again, is a bad idea, but it is what it is. And that's what happened, because this is what kids do. And I'm not going to justify it, but this is what kids do, right? Of the technological age. So I
want to put my old man conservative pants on, man. Like I've always been like this, bro. You never, ever share any kind of like, if it's something that you would not mind or if you're about to send something that you would be humiliated if your grandma got it, then you don't fucking send it. Like and I know how old man conservative that sounds. Like you shouldn't be doing that stuff on the internet, blah, blah. You could do it all the time, blah, blah. It's fine. We're all adults. Man, do you want to send that shit to your mom?
I've sent nudes
because Like,
I'll
it
own
happens,
I
dude. Like, it's just not a good fucking
I'll own it.
idea.
I'll own it. I'm gonna build now. I'm
All
gonna
right.
build.
I mean, you can at least use that. What's the the Google or no the on Apple? You
Oh,
could just
like-
like transfer it
Yeah.
over to
That's
somebody.
what like Signal is for. You
Yeah.
know? And like shit like
Right.
that, like
Yeah.
encrypted messaging
Yeah,
services.
an
No one
actual
will ever know
encrypted
about
messaging
this.
app. There you go.
Well,
I
it's
just
fucking
don't
funny.
get it, man. Like, and like I said,
You're
like
too old, man.
really early on, like it used to be the rule that when you
Right.
were on the internet,
Right.
you didn't even use your fucking name.
Yes.
And now look at us,
but
bro.
now
It's
you
like-
can be on OnlyFans and you can fucking
and make a really good
make
living.
bank.
That's
So-
a whole other can of worms. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
So those were kind of the issues, I think. Let me read through this to make sure that there's nothing else that I'm missing here. There's this guy, and this is an example of what I was talking about. Hawkins. This is from the article that I sent you, Zeke, from the New York Post. This is a quote from her. "I am not persuaded that 2 years is necessary," she ruled, arguing that such a sentence does not account for mitigating factors, including Mr. Hawkins' future potential. Further explaining her decision, she disputed the severity of the evidence investigators presented and suggested the more than 600 images they caught him with, quote, "don't signal an especially heinous or egregious child pornography offense." So that's one of the things she was continually questioned about. I understand the justification that she explained. I don't agree. And I am obviously for fairness in eyes of the law. I believe in all of the things. I don't want to go through the fucking list, but I just don't. It crosses a line for me. I don't care about this, and I don't care about whatever the reason is of like his future potential. Fuck you. It's like you just said. It's on the internet forever.
Yep.
You by
600
receiving
images,
these,
man. More than.
created another avenue in which someone could intercept these. These images are never gone. They are on the internet forever, and you took part in that. Even if you never used them, you never whatever. I don't care. I don't care. I don't give a fuck.
Yep.
And I know that I'm not the only one who feels this way.
Hard fucking no.
Not in this room and not in this state and not in this country.
Yep.
So I just don't care. And I think it's dark that she didn't use her discretion to add all of the qualifiers that she could to put these people in prison for as long as possible. I think that it's dark that somehow it was ruled that you could have this type of imagery and you could get as little as 3 months in jail. She's also talking about,
3
there are
fucking months,
other
man.
punishments that people get that change their lives forever. Like they can never use a computer unsupervised forever. Fucking good. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't get to use a computer by yourself. I don't give a shit. You downloaded images of children being abused. I don't care.
Maybe
I
we
don't
should-
care if you never get to own a computer ever again.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if you get left out of the complete technological fucking loop. I don't give a shit. You
Yeah.
don't get to do things like this and still expect to be in a civilized society. I just don't.
Yep.
I'm just not here for it. I don't know.
I'm just not here
I
for
understand that it's severe. I totally recognize that.
And I'm okay with it.
I just cannot
For it.
Yeah.
imagine
I want
if
severity,
it was one
man.
of my fucking kids. So I just don't.
just-
The delicate line there, I think, is when somebody is of the mind, if they're of that like thoughts about things but not acting on things, and they go to try to seek help from like some kind of mental therapist or something like that. I want there to be a doctor-patient confidentiality that can handle something like that, because then the doctor would have an obligation, maybe even legally, that if they thought that this person was at an actual severe risk to someone else's, that might cause harm to somebody by acting on those, those things or something like that, like they have an obligation to report, and then it goes down a totally different path. But if somebody walks into a therapist's office and says that right off the bat, I want there to be an out for them to take. If there is somebody that has these thoughts and they talk to a therapist and the therapist feels like they can fix that situation, like I want to err on the side of liberty in that particular aspect, because until you've committed a crime, that's when the law steps in. But
Yeah.
I really just don't want to get too close to thought crime. Too close. I'm willing to
Right.
get real fucking close, but I don't want to walk over the edge.
So to poke a little hole in that and to provide an actual solution to something that you're actually talking about is I don't ever see someone coming in to see a doctor and be like, hey, I'm having these thoughts. I don't think
urges.
a person would do that
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Like,
In reality,
a criminal's not going to go and be like, hey, I just fucking robbed the bank. That's
yeah.
neither here nor there. But the solution, and it's also kind of a scary thing when you think about it, is they've done tests on men and women where they they say this is what they're attracted to, whether they're homosexual or heterosexual or whatever, and they attract these nodes to their brain and to their genitalia, right? And they show them these images, whether it's just animals having stuff, like it's like a variety of things, okay, and they can tell by the spikes or whatever, by what gets you aroused and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to tell them like verbally, but they can see what gets you, what gets you going.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that would be a way, but there's with everything, if you legislate it, there's all sorts of fucking unintended consequences that could go with that. But if that's what you wanted to take care of, that would be one solution that I could think of, because that's something that they already do for studies.
Yeah, the pedo Turing test,
Right.
That's
yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know, man. Even then, like I understand, like in a reality where that, if that system could exist and could be reliable and all that, I could see where that would be a really nice like out. It would really help. But then again, somebody may. Part of the problem is that we are human that have free will, and like you could choose to struggle with something like that and fight against it for your entire life and never act on it, and we do that with all sorts of things in our daily lives. I mean, there's things, you struggle to not eat the fucking donut. I don't want to like cheapen pedophilia to that type of thing, but in my analogy at this point, like you're a human with free will who can choose to move past your baser instincts. You're not out there trying to rape every single woman you find attractive. You might be thinking it. You might be thinking about like, man, what could we get up to? What might that look like?
Not raping her, but having sex with her.
Yes, what I'm talking about. Like you see a girl and she's hot. You're like, you can envision certain things. You're like, hey, that's. But and I'm sure women do the same shit. They see Jason Momoa and they have a wonderful time up there. That's. I feel like we move around every day in our daily lives not acting on our baser instincts like that. And if that is somebody's fucked up, sick, and twisted baser instinct, I don't want to, throw them in a cage. Even if we could tell that they have that type of thought, I'm still just like, I'm uncomfortable with that kind of thought crime, I guess, really. It all comes down to that. But in a realistic scenario, it would make sense.
Right.
But, so as other than like the kind of light sentencing and like the convoluted gray area of the sentencing guidelines around those types of things, like what are some other like kind of standout moments during the hearings?
She took some hits for an amicus briefing, I believe it was, that she signed onto and helped draft, that was regarding the enhanced interrogation techniques used in Guantanamo. And in this briefing, it was said in there that they were akin to war crimes, and that the president and the secretary of state, because they're the ones that okayed them, were a party to them. And so she took some hits because some of the Republicans said, you called George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld war criminals. And the Democrats said, no, she didn't. She just was on a brief in which they said that the president and secretary of state committed war crimes. And then the next day, the Republicans said, what's the difference between saying that someone committed war crimes and saying that they were a war criminal? So, to which my point is, you fucking they torture people, so they're war criminals anyway. So what is the difference on whether or not you're calling them war criminals? They were fucking war criminals. They okayed enhanced interrogation techniques that we know now don't work. So what does it fucking matter? We're not going to put them in jail or try them for war crimes anyway, regardless of what she said. We know that. So why does it matter?
Yeah.
Because do you expect her? I guess it matters because they expect that when she gets on the Supreme Court, that she will rule that if a case comes up about those tactics, she will rule that they are not war crimes. But she should say that they're crimes because you're fucking torturing people. You're just holding them on foreign land so they aren't covered under constitutional principles. That's dark, and I think that it edges a little bit too close to war crimes for you to call it anything else other than that. So I would expect and hope as an American citizen that if she's on the Supreme Court and she's faced with a decision to decide whether or not enhanced interrogation techniques are war crimes or are illegal or legal, I would hope that she rules that they should be fucking illegal and unconstitutional. That is what I would hope.
Yeah.
And I think for the Republicans to try and lean another way is very dark and says something about their continued perspective on that part of American military history. What are your fucking takes on that?
I'm processing. Zeke, you got anything off the top?
No.
I mean, it sounds like amen, brother.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's kind of what I feel like. The only
Yes.
thing to also kind of remember, though, is that like it's not just, it's not like just the neocons are super into torturing people. These
No.
any
They
of
were
these
just-
long-term motherfuckers that have been around since the 1970s,
Yeah, no.
1960s, they all are part of the club, man. None of them actually believe that it's wrong, and even if they do, they don't give a shit. They're above us. These are just they're ants, man. We don't need to think about them.
They were just the
No
only ones.
consequences.
Yeah,
Exactly.
They just don't want themselves to be waterboarded.
They were just the only ones trying to spin it and turn it on her that she
Yeah.
had signed on to a briefing in which, they had claimed these things, which is,
Again, you signed on
Bullshit
to a
anyway.
briefing too. Like, okay,
yeah.
that's
But
the crime.
one of the biggest things that I took from this leans to exactly what you guys talked about before we kind of got into the meat of it was just exactly how politicized this entire event was. So many of the senators just talked about their own personal issues for the time that they had questioning. Dick Durbin is just a horrific senator, and every time the Republicans would have their time, they were saying editorialize. That's the word they were using. He would editorialize. He would bring up an article. Oh, well, actually, you said this, but this justifies what she said, so I'm going to go ahead and enter this into the record. And then a Democrat would question for 30 minutes, and then he would let the Republican go, and then he would do the exact same thing. So he would undercut everything they said at any time, even if it didn't really undercut their argument.
Yeah.
But that isn't to say that Lindsey Graham is not also a piece of shit, because he did the exact same thing. He just
definitely
yelled
a
at
piece of
Ketanji
shit.
Brown the whole time. Yeah,
Definitely.
it's
just a different kind of
it
shit.
was hard to watch.
Yeah, I'm
It was
sure.
very hard to watch.
I'm really glad I didn't have the opportunity to watch it
But we
in
do
its
it
entirety.
for you guys. We do it for the audience.
That's right. You do it for the audience, buddy.
Yes.
That is shit you put yourself through. Bravo.
Yeah. Amen. Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, if I get a new job here real quick, I'm sure I'll have more time.
There you go.
Be right there with you again. Once again, back in the trenches.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I think like the main issues that she got hit on. They talked about critical race theory because she's on the board of directors of a school a private school where they have, some Ibram Kendi books and shit like that. I don't agree with that. She's not one of the ones crafting what the curriculum looks like in that school. She's on the board of directors, so she probably just is financially invested in this school.
Yeah.
Her children may or may not go there. I don't know, but
She's got some connection somewhere.
it would only concern me to the extent that some form of critical race theory involved case would make its way to the Supreme Court. But that's a lot of ifs to throw out to say, well, you can't be on the Supreme Court just in case this happens maybe one day in the time that you're alive. And also there isn't a conservative majority or a majority in which would rule against critical race theory. That's a lot of ifs for me to try and put together to say you shouldn't be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So,
was there much talk about her history of, Like how long she's been a judge, how young she is. Is there any concern with her age that came up?
Not particularly. I think she's been a judge for like 10 years. And then before that, she was a public defender. She was a trial judge for a while. And she's worked in the appellate courts. Is where she's been in. She's been in D.C. the vast majority of the time. She was 1 year younger than Ted Cruz at Harvard. So they went to school together. So they knew each other when she went there. So... they hit her. This was another thing. They hit on
Incestuous, bro.
hit her a lot on
Yeah.
not saying whether or not she was an originalist or a contextualist, and she had a whole spiel of like, I don't have a judicial philosophy. I have a judicial framework or something. It was like 3 steps that she takes. Make sure that I'm being objective. Make sure this. Make sure this, and that's how I make sure that I'm being the best judge all the time. So I don't. Again, I don't know why it matters so much that she fits into one category or the other. I understand that that's an easy way to differentiate, to try and differentiate ways that she may rule in the future, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything, So I don't have any issues with that.
So Zeke, let me ask you this real quick, kind of along those lines. Because of, I guess, the convoluted nature of how these Supreme Court nominations, get picked, and then the circus show that is the nomination process, I find myself very disillusioned by the sanctity of the Supreme Court in general. What are your thoughts on, the, I don't want to use sanctity again, like the validity of the Supreme Court on the social level, the way we citizens can perceive the
Like if they're
the Supreme
effective?
Court
The legitimacy of the
legitimacy.
Supreme Court.
Thank you. That's it. Yeah. How legitimate do you find the Supreme Court these days, and why?
It's a big question.
It is a big question, I
It-
guess.
it-
Yeah.
it
Take a
is a big
second to
question.
digest.
I would almost say not that effective because they've just been so stagnant for I don't know since the 40s.
Yeah.
Whenever like the last major, at least in my eyes, the last major decision was like Roe v. Wade
Big one.
for me.
Yeah.
For me, or Brown versus Board of Education. Other than that, there hasn't been something
Earth shattering.
of substance
Yeah.
that has come from them. They'll take these cases, but
And my problem with it, just to kind of spin you in a different direction, I guess, is the fact that like it's become so blatantly just political. It's red team versus blue team, and they have conservative judges and they have the liberal judges, and then it's just a tit for tat. Everybody got super worried because Trump got 3 of them, and
Right.
and now it's like, okay, now we have our one, so it's a safe vote, and so I find myself really not giving a shit anymore about the Supreme Court. Like I understand the impact of we've got a Roe v. Wade type of hearing coming up at some point soon, and there's some pretty major decisions to be looked at. What'll come of them, we don't know at this point. A lot of times the Supreme Court looks at a severely, impactful possible decision. They go, that's not for us to do. You guys got to handle it on the appellate level. Then it kind of disappears. But it's become so political to me. I don't really see it as anything other than this weird, like, political lever that just, it always clicks to the left or it always clicks to the right. And depending on who is in power and how many people die.
I see. All right, that's what you were getting at.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's exactly a tit for tat thing, but it also goes back to what Donovan said. It doesn't really shift the power that much because we're led to believe that this judge is like super conservative or this judge is super liberal, but we have nothing really to go off of to make these assumptions. It's just what the media is telling us that these judges are like how they're going to do it, but they haven't done anything yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Like let them speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And then,
And honestly, if they weren't so fucking like psychopathic about it and like looking to catch somebody tripping over one word or how they phrase this, if there wasn't that fear of political and corporate press backlash, and you just let these people talk like human beings, we'd have a lot better idea of who these people are at the end of the day. You know, if they could sit there and be grilled for 16 hours and have no fear of reprisal over than just the content of what they say and not how they say it, or, you know, you say a boo-boo word.
Right.
If it was more like a fucking podcast, you could sit down and just talk to these people for 16, 18, 24 hours. Some of these things go for days and days and days. You'd actually have a really good understanding. The public would have a good understanding of who these people are at their core, how they think, how they process information. It's why Joe Rogan is so possible. It's because you put people out there long enough for who they are as a person to bleed through. You get a good grasp of who they are as a general human being after hours of conversation.
But the more politicized this entire body and endeavor becomes, the more you see these justices either answer in the way that they believe the public wants them to answer or say nothing at all.
Yeah.
And that becomes an enormous issue because the more influenced the Supreme Court is by public pressure, by what is, I don't want to say popular, because the Supreme Court is supposed to be doing what is good, what is the right thing, regardless of what might be best under current public perception, right? They need to do what is the right thing under the Constitution. And the more influenced they are by politics, the further disillusioned the general public may become. And the only power the Supreme Court has is their perceived legitimacy by the citizens themselves. They don't have anybody to enforce their laws because they don't write laws. They don't have anyone to enforce the rulings. They don't have an army. They don't have anybody to enforce anything. All they have is written decisions, and those decisions to be interpreted by the legislative branch and turned into laws. If the citizenry no longer sees those decisions as legitimate, the Supreme Court means nothing anymore. And if they are ruling consistently against what the people want, what the people actually want, because they're ruling what is in favor of what is politically popular, their power is completely removed. And when a third branch is removed and you're looking at essentially the legislative and executive branch and then the general masses, I don't know what you even call that system.
I think essentially it kind of goes back to what
Does that make sense?
It does.
Does that make sense?
No,
I
it
just said?
does.
I know
I
that
think
was like a little bit rambly, so I don't.
I think that makes sense. Because it essentially, effectively, if the populace perceives the most, the highest court in the land, as they're so fond of saying, if they look at them and say, it doesn't really matter what you guys say, it's just politics. It's just Democrats versus Republicans and conservatives versus whatever the hell the left is calling themselves that decade. The legitimacy already goes away. And at that point, the only shred of legitimacy they hold on to as a single on or off switch, a single lever of political, they're a single action political apparatus at that point. They're no longer, their opinions don't matter anymore. It's just a matter of how many votes they get and which direction it lands. What do you think, Zeke? Is that more or less your thinking?
More or less, yeah.
Dark times, bro.
That was a big one. That was it.
Dark times.
I had my brain pumping there for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
That
talk
was
about
healthy.
something a little bit easier. Well,
right.
Not totally easy, but a little bit easier. Let's go. Do you want to talk about the Amazon Union or Amir Locke?
Let's talk about Amir Locke real quick, because
Okay.
I put it in the thumbnail.
So Amir Locke was a man that was killed in Minnesota.
Yeah.
He
Barely
was
a man, dude. The guy was young.
young boy. He was asleep in his cousin's house. The police showed up with a no-knock warrant looking for his cousin.
This is in
and
Minneapolis, by the way.
Minneapolis. They
Post
had
George Floyd, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
This was just this was this year, February 2nd, in St. Paul, and the police had a key to the residence, actually, and they showed up there. Amir Locke had a gun next to him that he was legally allowed to carry. He picked up the gun when the police officers came into the house. He woke up and he grabbed the gun and he was shot because he had the gun in his hand.
Yep.
They announced, I think 2 weeks ago, this is from April 6th, so 10 days ago, that there would be no charges for the police officers who killed Amir Locke in this incident.
And it should be I think it should be stated too that Amir Locke was not named in the search warrant either.
No,
he was not
just
a
happened
subject
to be
of
at the
interest.
house.
Yeah, he was happening to be crashing at his cousin's house.
Yes.
And
was staying on the couch in the apartment when authorities entered on February 2nd without knocking as part of an investigation into a homicide in neighboring St. Paul.
Yep. I watched the body cam footage of this last night and it ended my night. I am so tired of these fucking no-knock warrants, dude. Breaking into somebody's private fucking property, hell-bent on, what's the right word? Spiriting, you spirit away somebody. You black bag them and you throw them in in the cruiser and you take them downtown. You're just pulling somebody out of their private property in the middle of the fucking night or first thing in the morning. This was like early. It was just after 6, I think, or between 6 and 7.
Outside. People are still sleeping.
Yeah, people are still sleeping. Dude's passed out on the couch, wrapped up in a blanket, man. And as I would do, I'd have my gun sitting right there too, because that's why else do I have it if I can't get at it. Mind you, I don't have it right now. I kind of feel bad for just saying that, but it, and the cops bust down your door, whether or not they kicked it in or they had a fucking key somehow. They come in your house and you don't know what's going on. You're passed out. You wake up. You grab your gun because who the fuck are these people coming into my house yelling and screaming? They're all in fucking body armor and shit. I grab my gun too, and then I die. Yeah. Because the state decided they had the right to come into your fucking house or a private domicile, because this was not his house. It was his cousin's place, right?
Yeah.
And they obviously didn't do their fucking due diligence because they came in and murdered somebody that wasn't even on the goddamn search warrant. I'm so tired of these fucking no-knock raids. We keep talking about them because they won't fucking die. This is post Minneapolis, George Floyd, post Breonna Taylor, all the shit. And this was still allowed to happen.
Yep.
I'm fucking done with these people, dude. I'm done with them. If they... Oh, yeah, dude. I'm getting angry right now. Sorry.
No. What's your take on this, Zeke?
So I'm not too caught up on all this, and you guys just said that they've already, it's open and shut. They're not pursuing charges on on the officer.
Yeah.
Yes. This is a quote from
All
this
right.
article. This is from the Star Advisor, which is actually a Honolulu newspaper. So we got it from Ground News. This is supposedly a high factuality newspaper, so that's why I have this article here. And I will send it to you if you give me just 1 second. There is insufficient admissible evidence to file criminal charges in this case. Specifically, the state would be unable to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt any of the elements of Minnesota's use of deadly force statute that authorizes the use of deadly force by Officer Hanneman.
Yeah. It's
If only there was some way for citizens to, repeal certain laws or talk to the legislature. Gosh,
Imagine
if there was
that.
if there was just some system to talk about that, fix it. But anyway,
Fucking tragedy, man.
it's fucking terrible that keeps fucking happening. It blows my mind that it keeps happening.
Yeah.
Could you clarify for me if they are allowed to, if in the state of Minnesota, do you know if they run like a check if you own like a firearm?
I do not know.
I don't know.
I know that the reason that this no-knock warrant was okayed is because the person they were going after had a history of being violent, and that's why the no-knock warrant was pursued. And that's why it's such an odd circumstance, because Amir Locke, they didn't know he was going to be there. He happened to be there with his firearm. He has no criminal charges in his past, to my understanding. I could be incorrect, but they didn't know he was there. The reason the no-knock warrant was okayed by the county was because the person they were looking for was known to be violent.
Known to be violent, huh? And that gives the state to kick in your door.
In their applications for search warrants of the Minneapolis apartment and other locations, authorities said a no-knock warrant was necessary to protect the public and officers as they looked for guns, drugs, and clothing worn by people suspected in violent killings. Authorities asked that officers be allowed to conduct the search warrant without knocking and outside the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. because the suspect being sought in the January 10th killing of Otis Elder had a history of violence.
It just sounds like they didn't do their homework.
Locke was killed seconds after the SWAT team entered the apartment where his family said he was staying. Body camera video shows an officer using a key to unlock the door and enter, followed by at least 4 officers in uniform and protective vests, time-stamped about 6:48 a.m. as they enter and repeatedly shout police search warrant. They also shout hands and get on the ground. That's when Amir Locke gets up and he has a gun in his hand and they shoot him.
The whole thing was less than, I think, 10 seconds before the shot was fired.
The video shows an officer kicking a sectional sofa, and Locke is seen wrapped in a comforter holding a pistol. 3 shots are heard, and the video ends. And I've seen the video. I don't know that it's not in this article, but you can find it.
Yeah.
It's still out there.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to push it out there, to be honest. It's never a good time watching somebody die on camera.
No.
Because, I mean, he was pronounced dead at the hospital after they rushed him to the hospital. It was like less than, I think, 15 minutes later. But, I mean, he sat there, bled out, and died.
Yeah.
When you're that close, I mean, it's pretty difficult to miss.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm pretty sure the police officers had rifles, so it's pretty impossible to miss.
It was the SWAT team.
So it's pretty impossible to miss from 5 feet away with a rifle like that.
You got
unreal.
You got the element of surprise. You have to jump on them already.
Yeah.
You see a guy, and that gives you the excuse to just pop.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the officer said. Yeah, is that he felt like his life was in danger because he saw the firearm.
Yeah, and I'm so done with hearing that as a fucking excuse, because you live in a goddamn country that has a Second Amendment. You should assume that everybody you are going to interact with as a police officer is and will be armed. Can and will be armed, because we live in a country with the Second Amendment that allows that. You need to, if you're going to put yourself in that situation, you need to understand that you may get shot at, probably will get shot at. You're going to break into somebody's house at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, whenever it is. If you don't expect to get shot at, I don't know what you're doing there. I don't know why you would expect not to get shot at, and to go in there with the mindset you don't know who's on the other side. This is not a fucking war here, man. This is like domestic, inner city. This is Minneapolis.
It's war on drugs, man.
The war on fucking drugs. Yeah, I forget. We are at war because we've been at war with drugs. I'm so done with this shit. And as soon as it was like, well, yeah, he's got like a violence charge and a drug charge or something like that. It's probably his cousin. I would assume.
I only brought up the gun registry is because if they did their homework and saw that he had a gun, then maybe they probably would have done something. But this wasn't the guy. This was his cousin. But they still didn't do their homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And failed to realize that the guy that they're looking for wasn't there in the first place, and they killed the wrong person essentially.
Since then, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey announced an immediate moratorium on such warrants, on the no-knock warrants, and on Tuesday he formalized a new policy that will take effect Friday, requiring officers to knock and wait before entering a residence. Some lawmakers have also been pushing for a statewide ban on no-knock warrants, except in rare circumstances.
You know what's really fucked up about that is everybody's passing up their own responsibility on this. If you say the mayor...
Yes,
the mayor
announced the immediate moratorium on the warrants.
So if the mayor has the authority to throw down a moratorium, he also has the authority to tell the cops what to do or not to do. And he doesn't say stop fucking doing this. He said we're going to put a moratorium on it. Just get rid of that. You right there in the law. It's obviously something you as the executive of the city have power over.
It might need to be done by like the policing commission, if they're the ones that dictate the policy of the departments. Then there's probably
like a limited power type of thing. The mayor could be like, stop now.
Commission.
But doesn't the state okay it at the end of the day? Like these practices are okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes.
This is why
only in the attempted accuracy. That's the only reason that I say that, because it doesn't remove, like you said, it doesn't remove the liability or the responsibility, because no one is doing anything outside of the mayor who's announcing the moratorium on them when they shouldn't be there in the first place.
Yep.
It shouldn't be left to the executive to lay down the hammer of this is not going to happen anymore because the legislature has effectively removed itself and the judicial branch of our state has not ruled against these yet. So
Yeah, at that point, you're looking to your dictator being like, please help us.
right.
When it should be handled at the congressional level.
Yeah. So, another unfortunate killing, and I hope to fucking stop seeing these things, man. I just couldn't be more against no-knock warrants. I agree with you in the sense that I feel like as a police officer, if you're going to no-knock someone's house, you should expect that they likely have a firearm, I don't think that, I don't know. I don't think it's right that I should be shot at my fucking house because I have a gun. You know?
Yeah.
If I'm a cop busting into your house, I should expect to be shot.
Yeah.
And I should know as
Especially if it's a stand your ground state.
yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. And the fact that we have to think about whether it's a stand your ground state or not.
I was thinking about that
bothers
on the
me.
way here.
Right?
I don't know whether or not we live in a stand your ground state. I was thinking about getting in an interaction in which I have to draw. I saw a video last night of it was the ending of a traffic altercation in which two people are arguing. They both got out of their cars, like in an apartment complex. One person saying, "You blew through the stop sign," blah, 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 blah. And he ends up pulling a knife on the second person. The second person happens to be a police officer who pulls an off-duty police officer who pulls his gun on this guy and then argues like with his mom and his wife and, whoever else is there. And it turns out to be fine. The guy walks away. But I thought about, what the fuck if I'm in a situation and someone pulls a knife on me? I'm absolutely going to pull my gun. I'm not going to consider getting stabbed,
Yeah.
But I probably have to say something, for my own legal protection. I probably have to say like, stop, or like you're threatening me, or I feel like you're endangering my life, or something to that extent, even though I'm not a police officer, before I fucking dispatch this person.
I have two things for you.
Yes.
Because we have a real life scenario where something similar to this happened in fucking Paulsbo months ago at this point. Yeah, I think it might have been even last year at this point. And then here's something from whatever this is worth. I don't know much about the site, but WashingtonGunLaw.com. It says, stand your ground law allows an individual who is lawfully permitted to be where they are to use any force necessary to defend from an imminent threat or serious bodily injury or death. So there is no duty to retreat.
Excellent.
Now, that being said, from the random gun law website, in Paulsbo, not that long ago, there was a situation in which somebody had gone to one of the local bars, been really fucked up. I think they might have been on some kind of drugs at some point. I don't quite recall. They got refused service and they recklessly sped through Paulsbo and went to another bar and then were refused service again and then recklessly ran down the rest of the road to the road and then caused like a 2 or 3 car pile up, smashed car, got out, walked to the house of one of actually it was like a couple doors down from one of my coworkers. And he went up and he was like banging on the door, demanded to get in. He's got to get in, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually tried to force his way in. And the person opened the door and he shot him and killed him. And they're fine. And it was called a justified shooting. And the guy was trying to break into their house and he shot and killed him.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're fine now. So it must have some kind of stand your ground law if that's the way it is. I don't know why you would have to have a law to defend your right to defend yourself, but in this state, I would assume you might have that. But it sounds like in Washington State,
you guys
it's
have
good.
better gun laws than we do, actually, in that respect. Because someone can break into our house and we can shoot them, but if they are running, we can't shoot them if they're outside of our property because we run the risk of hitting someone else with our firearm. Which, yeah, we may get them, but then guess what? We get that jail time.
Oh, that's fucked up. See,
It's ridiculous.
I hate that so much, man. And the idea of if somebody is breaking into your property and they run off your property, but like, what if they just, I don't know, killed your, I don't want to create a scenario, but the fact that you,
What if they go and get their friends and come back? Fuck 'em.
Exactly.
Yeah, fuck them.
fuck them, put them down, dude. Just because they walked across the property line, they're coming back to kill me.
I'm going to shoot you in the ass at the very least.
Forrest Gump your ass. They shot me. Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, fuck that.
Yeah.
So let's see here.
I'm glad we lightened it up right at the end. I was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
real
yeah.
angry.
Yeah.
No knock warrants pissed me off.
Last thing I have as far as the grab it goes, we talked about Jen Psaki a little bit. She's a shill. It's fucked up.
Yeah.
In the
Going to MSNBC, that piece of shit.
right.
Piece of shit.
Yeah.
In the effort of transparency, the two previous, Sarah Sanders and Kayleigh McEnany, did go and work at news companies when they left, but they were out of office when they did that. I think
Sean
Kayleigh
Spicer
McEnany
did
was
the same thing too.
Yeah, and I think Kayleigh McEnany was like the next day, but she was at least out of fucking office, right? At least she waited till she was out of office before
does
she
she
wrote up
work
the
at
contracts. I think she's on Fox now, I would assume.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's on Fox.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So she's on Fox, and I'm sure she was in talks or something, but fuck, man, it's dark. It's not dark. It doesn't look good that you're still in this sitting position in the White House, and these reports are already coming out that you're going to take a job at MSNBC.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not a good look.
Yeah, the fact that people know that you're using your current job as, part of your resume.
And you obviously don't believe in this administration because you're trying to get the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
You're halfway through and you're trying to get the fuck out.
You might have another guaranteed 2 years if you're really, really fucking hopeful that the guy doesn't keel over tomorrow.
No. So one of the last things I have here, Amazon Union, right?
Yes.
It's a warehouse called JFK 8, and it is on Staten Island. They had their union vote.
I literally drove by there the other day.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, so they had their union vote. That's the very first Amazon factory to have been unionized. There's obviously still the collective bargaining and everything to happen there, but they did have their vote. I'm trying to find the
This one
numbers
was
right
particularly interesting, if I recall correctly, because this was the first time a contemporary Amazon unionization attempt has been done where they created their own union and didn't try to
Yes.
join another. Like, this
Yes.
is not an existing Teamsters or anything. This is a bottom-up,
now. Oh shit!
actual, they created their own union.
Yes. Their Chris Smalls is the leader of the Amazon union push now, and he was previously fired from Amazon. This is always happening all the time, and I
Yeah.
just have such a difficult time with this because they're like, this pro-union person was fired for showing up to work 3 hours late. Well, bitch, you also showed up to work fucking 3 hours late. So what do you want from me? Like,
Yeah.
it sucks you got fired. You also fucking showed up to work 3 hours late. So
I get pissed at my guys if they show up 5 minutes late and don't tell me.
yeah, it's just, I understand because I've worked.
Consequences.
You know what I'm saying? I've worked a job forever, but also if you know that you're doing shit that your company doesn't like, maybe you should be an exceptionally good employee so you don't have any reason to lose your job. So if they do fire you, then it's obvious, or you have a better argument that it is because they're trying to union bust, right? If you're fucking trying to make a union, why would you also show up to work 3 hours late? That just seems stupid to me.
Right.
But this union is there. The vote was 2,654 votes in favor and 2,131 opposed, with 67 ballots being challenged. So they started their own union, like Colin said. Some of the other unions, the Teamsters and stuff like that, said they didn't really believe that it would work, and so they just made their own Amazon Labor Union, is what it is called. So we have talked about unions a few times. Like I said, in episode 123, we compared the PRO Act to this bill that Marco Rubio has introduced or tried to introduce that involves taking an employee and making them a non-voting member of the board of directors of a company and using that to allow them to have influence into the day-to-day operations and long-term operations and things like that. And so obviously pro-union people are against this because, they're non-voting and they're blah, blah, blah. So we talked about those things. What are some thoughts that you have on this if you want to talk about unions in general and also this specific decision?
I mean, just talking about unions in general, since it's not government, I don't necessarily have an issue with it. Like, if it means keeping your job, I'm always for a union. I'm not for a union constantly, giving you a pay raise for no reason, basically. Because there are some places that will give raises just for existing. You're not getting any better quality of goods or whatever. It's just whatever.
raises the cost to the consumer.
The cost is going to definitely get passed on to the consumer. So, I think the overall thing with this Amazon unionization, it's long term not going to be good. It's not going to pan out well for consumers. It might pan out well for the people who are working there, but for the consumer, I would say brace up over the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would make sense.
Pan out well.
Yeah. What do you got on unions, Ivan?
Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back, sir.
Thank you. I think that in today's day and age, I mean, let me preface what I'm about to say with, I think that everyone should make a livable wage, and I'm all for being able to work. But at the same time, I think it's absolutely absurd to think that to force an employer to do something that is against their interests, especially if it's a private company. If it's a public company, I guess it's a different story. Maybe you change the equation a little bit, but if it's a private company, then I mean you're skating on some real thin ice. If I'm the owner of the business, then I'm going to start seriously considering pulling a Walmart, right, and start automating processes that I really don't need to. That I don't need people for anymore. I'm going to get rid of checkout people at the checkout. I'm going to be getting rid of any sort of manufacturing things that can be done by robots. I'll be doing some cost benefit analysis that I'm going to be looking really deep into, things that aren't going to let me down and ask for vacation and pay raises and boohoo and ask for all this other bullshit, right? I think that it's a really interesting position that we're finding ourselves in anymore with, especially with automation and robotics and stuff. It's people have to be careful. They really do.
Yeah. And I'll just add on to that, and particularly to the Amazon situation. I think if anybody goes through at least the contemporary, like the last 6 months of this podcast, you'll find me as a relatively anti-union individual. But I have also found myself defending people like the union in Staten Island. I'm glad they got unionized, man, because let's put it this way. Jeff Bezos does not need to keep those people employed. He can invest a little bit of money, and with a series of smart conveyance systems and some automation, every single warehouse Amazon job can be automated, period. And it would not be a big investment on his part, and he would save a shit ton of money on the back end. It wouldn't take long.
The only reason why he's not doing that is because of the tax breaks he's getting for employing those people.
Yes, 100%. Because it benefits his bottom line currently.
I'm going to employ the minorities. I'm going to get the tax breaks.
Yeah.
They're going to shit on me for not paying them more. And I'm going to say, do you want robots? Or do you want $15 an hour?
Exactly.
And they're going to say, I want $15 an hour.
And if you look, like Staten Island, bro, like I lived on Staten Island for 3 years. Like I know the economy of Staten Island. They benefited greatly from that Amazon warehouse being where it was. A lot of people got jobs that didn't have jobs before, and they're making more money now than they were before. Even before this unionization effort. The Amazon warehouse in Bremerton, technically Bremerton,
The outskirts.
The outskirts. The city of Bremerton is massive, expansive, and does not make sense. But you put that, essentially, I think of that thing sitting in Gorst. It's right between Gorst and the airport. So I have a feeling you guys kind of can generally know where that is. Gorst needs those jobs. It's a good thing for those people to be there. And a lot of people have a more decent living now than they would have, or their commute is a lot shorter and they don't have to have as much hassle in their daily lives to make a decent, they can get by. I don't want to say it.
I think they make at least $15 an hour there.
Yeah.
I would assume. I mean, that's what Amazon pays. So it's probably closer to 20. Just because it's so close to the shipyard.
Yeah. And I know what the housing market is in this area. It's not going to set you up for generational wealth by owning real estate and stuff like that, by working in the Amazon warehouse. It'll pay the bills. It'll get you by. You can pay rent with it. You can make it. Right. So I can get that. But if this becomes a trend throughout every Amazon warehouse, the thing that's really going to come is, the people that end up remaining after the battle to be unionized will have a better paycheck. And there's going to be a lot of casualties in the process, and a lot of people will not have a job anymore. But the people that do retain it will be better off. Amazon does have a history of they take advantage of their employees, period. Like, I've known,
treat them like shit.
they do. And like, you hear the horror stories of people, peeing in jars, which I'm like, if you've never been on a long road trip, it's just called efficiency. But you hear the nasty stories, right, of them overworking people. They're essentially having people act as robots or do the best thing they can, because that's who you're competing against. Your job is to compete against your job being automated. And the minute you make it too hard or too expensive, we're going to solve that problem for you. But
I've got a question for you then.
Yes.
So based on exactly what you're saying right there, let's throw out a hypothetical. They do unionize, shit hits the fan. They say, you know what? We don't need you guys. We're going to go to automate, right? Now you've got a large population of a certain geography that is out of work. And let's say that this kind of trickles on through the economy, where everyone is doing the exact same thing. We don't need all the personnel. We don't need all the overhead. We don't need the centralization. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fire everyone. Now, there's a huge unemployment rate. Now, Universal Basic Income, UBI. What role does this play in this scenario? Do you think it needs to some real credence, or do you think that it needs to be ignored and innovation needs to come out of this through the pain?
So before I pontificate on high, I'm going to put this towards your brother first, because I have a lot of things to say about this. So I just want to give the floor to everybody. Hit me last.
So you're asking how universal basic income would play out in this scenario?
Yeah.
Or if it even has a place?
Yeah. It's the Andrew Yang question, right?
Yeah. So the UBI, as long as the government doesn't regulate it, I think the government attempted to bastardize Andrew Yang's UBI policy by monetizing or by printing out money and sending it to money
The COVID
over the last 2 years. Yeah. If that money was coming from private companies, and they weren't forced to, they were, and granted they were given certain promises or certain tax benefits for doing so. Given all that, I don't know if I would still go down that path, because we've seen what happens when we give people free money. Okay, the idea was for people to, it wasn't meant to live off of. It was meant to help them pursue other things that they wanted to pursue. And rather than do that, they just said, I can just live off of this and just not do nothing. So I don't feel that it has a place in this society. It might work out for a niche of people like Colin, Donovan, we would do something responsible with it. We would probably invest it or put it towards something that we want to do.
I bought ammo.
Yeah.
But there's an overwhelming population, which was just proven to us, that could give a shit less. And we're just like, you know what? I can stay home, and I have the excuse of I'm paying bills. I'm living within my means. Fuck it.
Yep.
I don't need to work anymore.
What do you think, Don?
That created a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah.
My answer to that would be, after having seen the way that the COVID funds worked out, I would sooner be in favor of a renewal of the Civilian Conservation Corps than I would be of, and I'll expand on that in just a moment, than I would be of Universal Basic Income. Thank you, Colin. The Civilian Conservation Corps is a World War II era program of the New Deal, in which they took people who didn't have jobs and they had them restore national parks and do infrastructure projects around the United States and paid them through the federal government. It was a nominal wage, and most of the money that they got went back to their families and homes so they could pay the bills. The men themselves didn't get the majority of the money. So in a world where this is necessary, where the government is likely to have to do something, quote unquote, I would sooner be in favor and in support of a renewal of the Civilian Conservation Corps than I would be of a standardized universal basic income.
Because at least something's getting on.
Because I don't think giving people money is the answer. And I don't think that letting people suffer will strongly enough or broadly enough incentivize people investing in themselves and learning a trade that they can't automate. So that's my concern, is because we saw people be so lazy with universal basic income, I don't have the faith that they would be incentivized to try and learn something new. I think a lot of people would just fucking die, which we've talked about the Thanos theory. That may not be a bad thing, but for the humanist aspect of I don't want people to just die en masse, I think a better route would be, like I said, a renewal of the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Oh, the weak of
That's a
heart.
very interesting comment, because I think that, I mean, everyone wants a return for the dollar spent, and as a citizen of the country, everyone wants to see where their money's going. And if you're seeing something get done and it's going to benefit everyone, I think that everyone would probably agree with that. I certainly do. But
Nobody really has a problem paying for police and fire department type stuff.
right.
Yeah, if I see a tangible return here, and the park I drive by that used to be all overgrown and shit now has a bunch of people there that needed some money, and now they're making the park nice again.
Right.
I could see that. I feel good about that.
And I don't remember what they made at the time. Maybe it was minimum wage. Maybe it was even under minimum wage. I don't know that even in 1940, whatever this was happening, that minimum wage was even established at that time. They were making a nominal amount of money. And like I said, I think 2/3 of it was, I would have to do the research again, but I think 2/3 of it went straight home to their family. The men doing the work didn't even see that part of the money. They got a little bit of it so they could buy some food and fucking beers or whatever the fuck, but most of it went back home so the people there could pay their bills.
All right, let me ask you a quick follow-up question.
Yes.
Not to run down a rabbit hole, but which do you think is more likely to happen?
What do you mean?
About the repurposing of people, labor towards a civilian conservation corps, or more of a UBI, no strings attached, just money printer go burr situation?
Oh, I think the UBI. People loved it. They loved it. It didn't benefit anybody. It benefited very few people in the long term. It benefited a lot of people in the short term. A lot of people got really fucked up. They did whatever it is. I told you, I bought ammunition. I paid off debt and I bought ammunition. That is the only thing I spent any of my COVID relief money on, was freeing myself from debt and ammunition. So, and I feel very comfortable with those purchases, that the use of those tax dollars that were returned to me. But like I said, there were a lot of people who bought stupid shit. They bought commodities, TVs, stuff that's going to break in a few years. They're going to have to buy a new one anyway. We didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah. My favorite were the Diamond Hands people. The apes were created. The apes were created from the stimulus packages, from that version of UBI, where those people said, "Fuck you!
Bought some crypto.
I'm fighting against the short selling of AMC and GameStop.
Right.
This is what I'm doing. I'm going to dump all this money right back into the system here and tell you to go fuck yourself with it." And I think that was incredibly uplifting. It's probably one of the only things that got us through like certain points of the pandemic era, right? I was like, thank God for the apes out there causing fucking problems with their free government stimmies.
I will say that when the Green New Deal was proposed, there was the 3 pages of it that it was. There was a small, because we talked about it however many episodes ago it was. The only credit that I could give it was that there was a Civilian Conservation Corps style program, and that's how they were going to build the green infrastructure, was by hiring people who didn't have jobs. That was the only credit that I could give to it.
And that's how you build the socialist utopia.
So if the only people who are going to propose it are going to be people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, then I definitely don't think that it will ever happen, and I think that the UBI is far more likely to exist than a renewal, because I don't see anybody
wanting to
reasonable. I know about that, but I also don't see anybody in Congress now saying, you know what actually worked at one point in time when the rest of everything was fucking people, when we taught people how to work and we reinstilled in them the American spirit by force.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that
during an era that where like the internet didn't exist,
Yeah,
a lot of like the modern day contemporary infrastructure wasn't even conceived of yet. So these people, like, at some point just was like, well, shit, we got to go back to work. I got to go dig ditches again. We're building a dam.
It didn't end the Depression, but at least you were working and that you knew how to do something new when the war was over, and you could try and get a job somewhere else.
Which should probably say something towards the citizenry's state of mind and emotional relationship with the overall economy. Kind of it's the thing that can keep it alive or kill it.
Yeah.
And it's just so I'm going to go ahead and say that at this point, my version of, you know, seeing this UBI essentially attempt utterly fail was kind of a big awakening to me anyways. I had been a relatively big proponent of a UBI situation, right? And I think, mind you, the pandemic had some extenuating circumstances that might have made certain people make certain decisions, make worse decisions than if they would have if the status quo had existed and they just got extra money every month. Kind of when we were talking about UBI with Andrew Yang, you know, COVID wasn't a thing yet. It was all still kind of status quo, more or less. And it was just like, hey, how would you like to have an extra $1,200 a month or $1,800 a month or $1,000 a month?
Not work overtime.
Yeah,
kind
like,
of what it was like.
Yeah, that was a different situation. But once we saw it really, I think we saw it more in a pure form too, because people were literally out of work because the government said your company that you work for, that you rely on for a living to keep a roof over your head and meals on the table, cannot operate because we say so.
It's not essential.
No, it's not essential. You are not essential. Your life that you have chosen or have fallen into, whatever it is, the current state of your life where you find yourself now is actually not essential to the operation of this country. So we don't really need you. So here's some money. And that is a huge fuck you to most of America. Because even the people that continued to work, whether they were skirting the rules or not, you know, once we were elevated to the status of essential, we still felt that. We still felt the fact that, like, yeah, I get to work and nothing else is open. This is fucked up. This is stupid. I'm not better than the people that run my Domino's. Why can't I have pizza now? That's a bad situation because I think Domino's remained open in some capacity. But you know what I'm talking about.
Example, I was a good example at that time where we were open, right? I work we make medical splints and stuff like that. And we were open because we're a medical facility, and it was kind of up to my boss to designate whether or not we were essential, and we were because he wanted to pay people. But because no other physical therapists, occupational therapists were open around the country. We had no orders and no work to do. Yeah. Only the red states that never closed. So like pretty much only Florida and some other small places that we were still getting orders from. But there's, half the building that had no work to do. And so my bosses ended up taking on volunteer projects. We were making face shields for like 4 months that they worked with some other companies and got the materials, and they donated our time and those materials to local first responders and hospitals and medical centers and stuff like that. And so they just ate the cost of all the stuff. That's, again, certainly when tax time came around, some things worked out in their favor. But,
I'm sure.
Yes. But at the time, they just ate the cost of that because they didn't want to have to put 45, 47 people on unemployment for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
And it was crushing. This was the whole point. It was difficult for me to go to work and to not fucking have anything to do. To do that same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. It did not make you feel like an essential worker just because you still had a job and you were still going to work.
Yeah, because that's that weird intermediary where I had work because we were deemed essential after the first 15 days or whatever it was. Right. And so but my work by definition has value, and so like you have purpose and all that stuff. But if you're working in manufacturing or something like that, and you can clearly tell if you're the shipyard worker that shows up to work and you're ready to go, and they're like, well, here's a broom. Your job today for the next 8 hours is to sweep this building.
Right.
Like, all right, well, what do you want me to do after the first hour? No, your job today is to sweep the building.
Yes.
It's not, that doesn't sit well with people, man. Like, it might seem cool to people that like work all the time and shit like that, but what are you supposed to do with yourself all day, man? Just hang out?
Well,
And it's fucked up because it's like, well, yeah, what do you got to do? Stand around? It's like, yeah, but that's not rewarding. I don't want to do that all day.
No.
I want to do something like that's productive. I don't want to just sit here.
well, and to add to it, like I can work overtime every week, and there's many people around the country that work overtime every week to make ends meet. And because we didn't have work, I couldn't work overtime, so I also had to use vacation and sick time continually throughout the pandemic and borrow it eventually and put myself in a deficit so that I could maintain the standard of living, which is not. We don't live a crazy, elegant lifestyle. Yeah. We live in a basement apartment underneath Jordan's grandma.
Pinky
so,
out.
yeah, we don't live a fancy life. To maintain that lifestyle, I had to put myself in a deficit for those hours and watch other people not work and make more money than I was to not work. That's crushing. That is crushing for people.
Yep.
And it wasn't just me, that was experiencing that same deal.
Yeah, and I'm much more apt now to be okay, and it sounds callous, but like I'm okay to watch people like sit here and fail because they make really bad decisions in life.
You gotta hustle, bro.
Like I work too goddamn hard in both my day job and it's not just like a 9 to 5. Like I own and operate a company, and with a couple extra folks and stuff like that. But it's still like it takes most of my life, and I think you could probably attest to that.
Yes.
And then I come home and I do the podcast stuff, and we have all of our Salt the Streets things going, and like I hustle my fucking ass off, and I feel like I've earned where I am in life, right? And I don't like it when I see other people decide that like because of the particular situation they're in, they don't have to work hard anymore, and they can get by just fine and not worry about it. I am much more now a fan of the Thanos Project than I ever used to be. I'm okay with watching people fail because they make bad decisions. I'm down with the safety net, and I don't want to prop up people that I don't think should. If they don't work hard, I don't want them around.
Throw consequences.
Yep.
Throw consequences.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's really what it is. It's not so much you work hard or not. It's like you make a decision, and you need to pay the consequences.
Personal responsibility. Whether
that's good or bad. Yeah. I need personal responsibility with consequences, better or for worse, on the other side. And we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Word.
Excellent.
Well, then I think we should probably wrap this segment up.
Part. Yep. And then we'll come back.
Really quick.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I missed a large part of this segment, but I would highly suggest, as far as like the whole race relations and confusion that's going on in America when it comes to all this sort of stuff. There's a book by
Ibram Kendi.
oh my gosh, it's Black Rednecks and White Liberals.
Ooh.
By I was digging up all of the books that I've read over the past year, and this one fell perfectly into this discussion. It's very, very good. It's written by Thomas Sowell.
Oh, Thomas Sowell.
Okay.
That explains it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Black Rednecks and White Liberals.
2005. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It explains a ton. But anyways, that's all I really want to throw out there.
How fucking great is Thomas Sowell,
Zeke,
by the way?
No, absolutely. Do you have anything else you want to add to this, Zeke?
No, that was pretty good.
Okay. Then
right.
with that, we will take a short little break, 3 minutes, and we'll be back for the fourth part. We're going to talk to Ivan a lot about macroeconomics. Is that what we're talking about? Some macros? Yeah. So
we're going to learn how to be... We're going to learn how to economically survive the future, I think.
I'm probably going to spend a lot of the time like...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I need to work on that.
Okay, so we'll be back in 3 minutes for part 4. Thank you, guys.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you